Now you done did so many shows and movies. I mean, we could talk about it for hours, but I gotta ask you about some of the films that I was definitely familiar with. The Cry Beloved Country. Now that featured James Earl Jones. Can you talk about how you got involved with that project, and did you get a chance to interact with him?
It's interesting. They cast me as a driver in that production. And so in the car that I was driving, the cab, James Earl Jones was my passenger. And that's how I ended up interacting with him in that vehicle, waiting for the shot to be called, or in the scene, or waiting when we're having our meals and so on. So that's the how I met James Earl Jones. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Shout out to James Earl Jones. Definitely one of the greats. He's been around for so long. That's phenomenal. Um, Now let me see. Now, what was it a big difference between doing films, movies, in comparison to TV or even theater?
Um, I went to Columbia University to study theater directing. Theater is my first love. And I think this prejudice that those of us who come from theater just think that until and unless you've been through those boards in the theater, you're not quite an actor. And I know people will be angry with me, but it tests your craft, absolutely tests your craft. And so, yeah, I've directed plays in the theater. By the way, I also did the piano lesson here in South Africa, August Wilson's The Piano Lesson. And 2 years ago, I did Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. I just love good text. So, yeah, that's my first love. But people know me from acting in films and television. So for me, I'd put theater first, and then film second, and television third, and showpiece 10th. Yeah, it, yeah, it
Okay.
corrupts the craft.
Wow, wow. I appreciate you breaking it down, because a lot goes into all of that. A lot of times the viewers, we just see the finished product. But like you mentioned, kind of more so if you really want to, test your craft and the things that you have to go to prepare in order to give us that final product, sometimes we don't, visualize all of those things. So thank you so much. Let me see. Okay, now I can ask you about another film. I'm not sure if this was filmed in the U.S. or not, but Sidney Poitier, the late great Sidney Poitier, featured in it. Mandela and De Klerk. You was listed as
Yeah.
being in that film. If you could just talk about how did you get involved with that project, and did you get to interact with Sidney Poitier?
He is an angel. He embodies what we in South Africa called Ubuntu. Um, I always tell people this. I, as an actor, acting in film, it becomes very difficult if you keep cutting up to like the seventh time, the dialogue disappears from me. And I'm doing this scene with Sidney. He was acting Nelson Mandela, and I was Walter Sisulu. So that put us opposite each other quite a bit. So he 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 then realizes that I'm in trouble. Instead of throwing out his toys, he asks the director to, let's take a break, sit down. And he takes me, we go and have coffee and some muffins and so on. We talk about the weather, and I tell him how I watched him in films like To Serve with Love,
Mm-hmm.
and the other films. And then I tell him I was at Columbia, really chit chat. Eventually he said, look, can we go and do this? I say, yeah. He say, are you ready? I say, yeah. You sure? Yeah. I said, let's do. He said, he calls the director and we get on set. And it was beautiful, beautiful. To the extent that at one point, I think you might know, Nelson Mandela was at Pollsmoor prison at some point. And we did a scene with Sidney at Pollsmoor. A quiet scene. At the end of the scene, we got an applause. We got an applause for how we acted that scene. And I always say to people, he taught me a lesson. When I am the elder on a set, when I bring more experience, more craft, more expertise, and everything, I should be generous with my script, with my acting and my influence. Tay, please understand, acting is like playing tennis. The better your opponent, the better your own game gets. And that's just how it works. And so because of him, I have become that on every set that I find myself. I gotta tell you this one incident that happened on set. We were showing scenes in the old apartheid uh, hospitals and cells. The beds were made with this hard steel, brutal steel. And he hits one of those corners with his shin. Painful, painful. Oh, the directors, producers, everybody was panicking. Sat down, everybody, they send us away. And he looks at his leg, and there's just a drip of blood. And they call the medics, and they clean him up and put on a plaster on his wound. And he says, okay, I'm good, let's go. Just like that. No prima donna kind of tactics about him. Absolute gentleman, a father, an artist, and I don't know. He made a huge impression in my own life. And then, of course, he allowed me to visit his particular suite in his hotel so that we can just sit and chat and just, I can tell him more about my country. So, yeah, it was great being with him on that set.